Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to Get in the Herd, a recovery podcast from the McShin Foundation. I'm your host, Alex Bond. I am a peer leader and recovery coach here at the McShin Foundation, as well as a house leader, and even more importantly, a person in recovery from substance use disorder. I'm here with a couple great guys. I got Casey and Paul here. How we doing, gentlemen?
What's up? Great. Doing good.
Awesome. Casey, why don't you introduce yourself to the audience?
My name's Casey Copeland. I'm a certified peer specialist from Little Rock, Arkansas, and I work for a nonprofit called Exodus.Life.
We're happy to have you on. Paul, why don't you tell the people who you are?
I am Paul Stevens from Little Rock, Arkansas. I'm the director of a nonprofit there called Exodus.Life. And Casey and I work together working with addicts pre-release and post-release from Arkansas prison system.
Okay, can you explain a little bit of what exactly Exodus.Life is to the audience?
Sure. We do pre-release recovery education and reentry education for inmates around 3 months prior to their release. And so we have a series of classes, including 12-step recovery, entrepreneurship, just a series of classes that are all designed to equip them with the skills they need when they get out, because it's tough. Being a felon, being an addict, being out on the street, there's a lot of obstacles you can imagine. And but it's also designed to give hope, because everybody that works for us is an addict, has been through it, been there, done that, bought the t-shirt and moved on. And so it's a hope-giving, hope-bringing effort.
So it is a peer support model. Everyone on staff is also in recovery.
Yes.
Yourselves included.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's phenomenal. I really subscribe to the peer support model. I think using our lived-in experience is a completely unmatched asset that we have.
Well, I could say something heretical right here. So I think it's the biggest deal since the Big Book.
Sure. No, I can
really
agree.
do. I really do. I think it's going to make a big difference in recovery over the next 10 years.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's beautiful. So I hear the reintegration into society. I've been incarcerated myself. Once is more than enough. I'm pretty sure that's part of your story, Casey.
It is. I've been incarcerated more than once, but sometimes it takes a few times to get it right.
Mm-hmm. So does that added experience, do you personally go into these jails and teach these classes and discussions, or how do you use that as an asset?
Well, when I started working as a peer, I was the first peer in the state of Arkansas to hold a position within a jail setting. And the fact that I had been incarcerated helped me. It was really easy for me to gain the guys' trust once they realized that I wasn't a Fed or a U.S. Marshal sent in there. We were able to really break through the trust pretty quick.
Yeah, because that consistent paranoia is something that a lot of addicts deal with in general, and it's just exponential to anyone that's incarcerated at the same time.
Totally agree.
And so do you guys deal with the mental health side of things as well when you're going into these jails with Exodus.Life? Well,
I mean, the statistics tell you that you can't help but to deal with the mental health deal because it's real prevalent. We're more equipped to refer and focus on really core problem solving for individuals rather than doing any mental health education or intervention.
So what sort of skills are we talking about? We're kind of using these blanketed statements of reintegration, reacclimation. What are the specific things that we're teaching these individuals?
Well, what we talk about is you got to face the truth about yourself, and a lot of the things that we're taught and believe, and this is universally true, not just about addicts, are just lies. And we've become so accustomed to them, we don't even see them as that anymore. And so if your beliefs are false, your thinking is going to be bad, and you're going to make bad decisions. And so the good news of that is change can mean you can work your way back, figure out the things you believe that are not correct, and you can correct them. So there's hope. And so, we have a 12-step overview in our real subscribers to the 12-step program. And so principles like you're not only powerless, but you're crazy. and
Insane.
and you need help really bad,
Mhm.
and you're probably going to die. And so we're teaching those kinds of concepts. But another case, like we teach entrepreneurship, and you say, well, what does that have to do with recovery? Well, if you look at the 8 principles of entrepreneurship we teach, it's the 12 steps taken from a different perspective. And so it's the same principle of you got to change your mindset, you got to control your thinking, you need to talk nicer to yourself, but it's also you got to come to have confidence and self belief. And those aren't just like natural thoughts that come to our head, but we can learn the skills of controlling our thinking and redirecting it and reframing it and begin to develop in those ways. So if I'm doing that and I'm facing the truth about myself and I'm facing the truth about the things I need to change about myself, all of a sudden my personal self-respect begins to shoot up.
The masks start coming off.
My masks start coming off. I start telling the truth. I start listening. And all of our classes are done in facilitated groups. And so we tell them, you're going to learn more from each other than you are from the teacher.
Sure.
And so we just let them roll. Once we get on topic and in concept, we just let them talk about their lives and what needs to be done and what needs to be changed and allow them to process what I call the grief of life.
Because like when I'm doing groups here in a setting, I try to almost instigate some sort of dissent.
Right.
Like I want you to disagree with me because it forces you to think for yourself. And then, Susie can say this and then Bobby can completely disagree. But it helps us kind of glean some information about ourselves at the same time and what we believe and how we believe it. So did you go through this program or did you have anything like it when you were incarcerated?
I would have loved to have had something like it, but no, I did not. I had a friend whose wife was working for Exodus, and she had asked me to come up there and just start off by just telling my story. And I had about 90 days clean, was, fired up about recovery, fired up about my future. I didn't have a whole lot going on at the time. My main focus was recovery and staying clean. And so when I got up there, I met Paul and everybody, and they gave me an opportunity to actually start facilitating the entrepreneurship class. And I continued to do that for several terms and just stay involved. For me, it was at that time in my life, it was a lot of volunteering. It was getting out of self, And so I volunteered just about everywhere that would let me, that involved addiction or being homeless or whatever. And I spent an entire year following that same pattern.
Just give it back.
Just trying to give it back, build a network, get involved. I was involved in a lot of things back then, including doing drug testing for transitional houses.
Sure.
And so, yeah.
That's good. I wanted to bring up Jamie's question right here. Either one of y'all, feel free to jump in on this. He was asking in what ways we could help reduce the stigma for incarcerated addicts in the community. Any bright ideas, gentlemen?
Hold your head up.
Yeah.
And hold your head up high. I ended up, let me say, I've been in recovery from meth for 40 years. I've been sober for 30. It took me a long time to come to the conclusion that my strengths and abilities were undiminished by that, and that I was as good as anybody else. And so I moved into jobs that you wouldn't ordinarily think that I could get, and that I didn't really believe that I could get until I became an executive pastor at a mega church that had about 10,000 people in attendance. And I had THDs and PhDs working for me because I understood pastoring, because I knew what pain was. Does that make sense?
No, absolutely.
And so if you're out there and you're in recovery, you've probably got the equivalent of a PhD in addiction.
And lived in experience.
And lived experience.
Suffering.
Yeah.
And so you know more about it than a lot of the psychiatrists, doctors, and treatment clinicians who are working the problem. You have something to offer. You have no reason to hold your head down. And so that's the biggest part, is don't tolerate the stigma. And I'm not saying, go bust somebody in the face, but But just being able to look up and say, yeah, I'm in addiction, been in recovery for this many years. I can't tell you how much I've learned.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And I can say, at least from even my experience, that I, as a coping mechanism, hide behind being, self-deprecating or sardonic and being kind of just like, I don't know, put myself down a little bit just to make myself feel more comfortable. But then it changes the perceptions and how other people perceive me is kind of what I hear when you say that.
Right. Yeah. The problem, I mean, I'm speaking for myself here, but I did so many things that I don't want to talk about on a podcast.
Sure.
That are down in my heart, and I know I did them,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm deeply ashamed of it. But that's not who I am anymore.
It doesn't define you.
It doesn't define me. And since it doesn't, then what maturity means is I know what I'm good at. I know what I'm not.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm able to face both areas objectively. So I can use my strengths with confidence. And in an area where I'm not as good, I'll look at you, or for example, we hired Casey,
Mm-hmm.
and say, hey, you're better at this than I am. Can you help me out? And so good leadership or good friendship, good peerage is understanding, hey, I'm good at some things, I'm not at others. And let me take a humble pride in what I'm good at, in my strengths, and be able to acknowledge my weaknesses and say, yeah, that's me.
Mm-hmm.
I probably did that. If y'all ask me to do it, I'll probably screw it up again.
Mm-hmm. How we can lean on other people.
That's right. But in truth, and not
Yes.
because we're working in a world of reality and truth instead of fantasy and illusion, which our addiction really was a world of fantasy and illusion.
Yeah.
It keeps us delusional and stuck in this like false sense of identity. And I think overcoming and finding our identity and purpose is how we fit in the puzzle piece compared to like, maybe we're not a corner piece. Maybe we're right in the middle, but it's kind of like, life's a stage. Everyone's got to play their role.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, and when you're playing your role, you feel good.
Mm-hmm.
I also wanted to touch on that.
Absolutely.
The question about the stigma, that's always an uphill battle. I think that, if you've never been, in my case, hooked on the opioids and the meth, and you've never been incarcerated, how, all is what you hear, and it's like, oh my God, he's been to prison. He's a horrible person. And I think it's just educating people. And because I can show you a ton of people that I run around with and talk to regularly that have, sustained recovery and, can help break the stigma, like I said, by educating. But just because you've been hooked on drugs, you can recover. I mean, I'm living proof of that.
Yeah.
Just because you've been to prison doesn't make you a bad person. I mean, we make mistakes. I mean, when you're putting the combinations of drugs in your body that I was, you're not solving world problems.
Mm-hmm.
You're really just creating problems. But, since I've quit putting, mind and mood altering substances in my body, I don't act like an addict.
Mm-hmm. And that's part of the solution. I mean, there's also abstaining is not just enough.
Yeah.
I think working a program is
it's an ongoing process.
For sure.
It's an ongoing process. It will always be. But, I think that you just got to educate the community.
Mm-hmm.
To try to break the stigma.
Educate the community. I'm glad you said that because I've seen this, conversation and the stigmatization work as a formula of I have a disease. I do what it takes to try to cure myself of that disease. I get in legal trouble because of it. I'm labeled a criminal and I'm labeled a bad person.
Right.
So that whole cause and effect and change of actions is then okay, so now people think I'm a bad person or the perception is of that just because I have a disease, which some people even still think is a choice. Like, oh, you choose to put that first one. And you do, but you also choose to find the better way out.
Yeah. And once you put something in you that you can't stop putting it in you afterwards, I think that pretty much defines what a disease is. But yeah, you're right. Again, it's people, they don't know. They don't know until you live that life and you come out. If you've been a part of what I've been a part of and you've been around people like us, you realize that we are not bad people. We're really miracles is what we are, because it is very hard to come out of the stigmatism of being a convicted felon, being a drug addict, and trying to reenter society successfully and not be looked down on.
Yeah. And there's this advantage of people in recovery that I've met are some of the most compassionate, grateful, humble people that I've ever met because they've had to overcome the struggle that maybe other people haven't been able to do. Casey, Jamie has another question. what is your background?
It says, what is your background with being incarcerated, or what has your background with being incarcerated helped you in assisting other addicts in this journey?
Well, part of being a peer specialist involves, role modeling recovery, and the fact that I have been incarcerated and I'm, where I'm at now in life, I can help people that don't think it's possible. I mean, I don't just talk about it; I live it. I can show you. I don't have the answer for everybody, but I can tell you, just because you've been to prison once, twice, 5 times, doesn't mean that you can't come out, reenter society successfully, complete parole requirements or whatever your paper says you have to do, and get a good job and get on with life.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I was to the point when I got started that I refused to allow that to happen. I had been successful before, and I knew that I had the motivation to get back. Now, don't let me sit here and take credit for it like I did it on my own.
Mm-hmm.
It's about the main thing that I can help people with is telling them, when you get out, don't try to do it alone. Build you a network of people that you can rely on, that see things in you that you're not going to see in yourself. People used to say things about me when I first got clean and got out of prison that I didn't look in the mirror and see the same thing. But once it started to, what people were telling me started to line up with how I felt about myself, then it was time to move forward.
Yeah, once we get rid of that delusion at the end of the day, because that was something that I suffered with, at least when I first came here. I found out I was an addict when I was like 18, but I was like, I'll cross that bridge when I come to it. Yeah. I'll get to it. The 2 DUIs in a week, and it was like, you got to face the music now, whether you want to or not.
Yeah.
And I just wasn't ready, and I needed something like that to push me over the edge. And it's sad, but other people have to learn that way sometimes.
Yeah, well, we put most of the barriers in our mind that stop us.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, if you come out and you say, God, I've been to prison, I've got a horrible past, I've been an addict since I was 13 years old, or whatever the case may be, nobody's going to want me. You feel that way about yourself, you're probably not going to find anybody that does want you. But I feel like there's no substitute for hard work. If you get out and you put your best foot forward, and for me, I believe in God, and I believe that God will continue to bless me and continue to bless my efforts. But I got to be willing to put in the effort.
Put in the work. Absolutely.
Put in the work.
And one thing I hear is that self-fulfilling prophecy is, if I think I'm worthless, other people, I'm going to become worthless. I was a self-saboteur throughout my career history. I would get what I wanted and not reach my full potential, as other people would call it, because I was afraid of what would happen when that success finally came.
Right.
One of the other things that I kind of wanted to touch on while we're still talking about the incarceration piece is the possibility of decriminalization and reclassification of different substances. I know Oregon is currently working on a bill that'll be voted on in November to I don't like the word decriminalize as much, so we'll say reclassify drugs or substances to misdemeanors. Is that something you'd be interested in seeing, Paul?
It just makes sense. And I think we're going to be driven to it as a nation. The United States, a lot of people aren't aware, we have more people in prison than any other country in the world.
Absolutely.
And so in a small state like Arkansas, you have less than 3 million people, but you've got 20,000 people incarcerated in prison, not even counting the county jails. Mm-hmm. And then you've got 60,000 under supervision of the state. Every year, 10,000 are released, and 11,000 go back.
So it's just climbing up.
So it's climbing up, and we're already spending $500 million as a state on corrections. And the truth of the matter is, a good portion of those people are nonviolent, drug-related offenders who need treatment, rehabilitation, whatever language you want to use. My preferred language is they need to grow up.
Okay. and valid. Yeah.
I mean, that's just,
even John will say this is an immature disease. This is a stunted growth type of disease.
It is. And so, but they have to have the opportunity to do that. The way culturally we look at that, we actually make it more difficult, mm-hmm. not easier. Where, anybody that's really interested in this topic, I would Google Portugal. Mm-hmm. And there's a couple of other countries that have moved toward decriminalization and rechanneling the money and the focus and development of people.
Mm-hmm.
Now, having said that, I'm not a hug-a-thug guy. And so there are people in prison that I'm really, really glad are there.
Mm-hmm.
And I really don't want to get out. And I don't want to be in a dark alley with them.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm not saying, that we need to clear the board.
Wave a magic wand and say you're exonerated.
That's right. And because, then people need to pay for the crimes. I believe in that. I believe in the consequences. But it doesn't make sense to take kids that were unable to cope with life and who end up in prison and then have them caught up in the system for the rest of their lives. Mm-hmm. It's a terrible loss of human resources.
Yeah, I agree. I'm going to tell you, I'm not going to sit here. There's an old saying, I wasn't incarcerated for singing too loud in church. I was out there. I was dealing with stolen property. I was living the life of an addict. There's no justification there. One thing that I've always been honest about is, yeah, I did it. But, I did time for it. Still paying back restitution of almost $30,000. I've completed all my other obligations. It would be nice, being a country boy from Arkansas, to be able to have gun rights whenever everything's taken care of. And I think that for me, I just feel like if some of these people that had these little charges didn't have to be labeled as a felon, I think that they could in return get better jobs and stuff for themselves without that criminal record.
Mm-hmm. And that's what Gwen was just saying. I actually got a document in the mail yesterday because I had to serve time for one of my DUIs, and I got out. A week later, they sent me a big packet of stuff that was pretty much reintegration pamphlets. Right. A class would be pretty cool, and I'm fortunate enough to be in a situation where I can more utilize that stuff to give to someone else than utilize myself. But the fact that it's condensed into 10 pieces of paper of, go to this employment center, go to this treatment center, and it's just like a, figured out type of thing.
Right.
It means that it's an infrastructure that continues to fail us.
Yeah.
Well, I think what Gwen is saying is right. There are a number of professions and types of jobs that felons are not going to be considered for. Mm-hmm. But again, you got to reframe that. All right, so that eliminates those. Yeah. And so those are not options. Well, what are my strengths? What are my gifts? What are my plans, given what options are available to me? Mm-hmm. And so having a network around you to support you and say, hang in there, Gwen, and you're going to make it, and let's look at your strengths and help you make a plan, and not assume that you're doomed to work in a dead-end job for no money for the rest of your life, mm-hmm. because you're not. You may not get to work in one of the professions that you had hoped for, and hopefully some of those consequences will change in time, but it doesn't mean that you're stuck.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that's what I hear when you say an entrepreneurship class.
That's why
that's exactly what it is. Is all right. What resources do we have? What do I bring to the table? I don't know about you guys, but I know a lot of people who were drug dealers, so they supported their habits. Drug dealers are just entrepreneurs.
They're entrepreneurs.
Well, and with as many barriers as an addict coming out of prison, not just people coming out of prison, but especially an addict coming mm-hmm. out of prison has to face, they've got to be an entrepreneur for their life.
Yeah.
They may not go open their own business, but they have got to learn to operate, to identify resources, to identify problems as opportunities, to pull themselves up by their bootstraps,
persevere,
to mentally discipline themselves, to believe that they can do this and get through it. It's the same principles,
yeah,
but it takes a lot of determination.
Yeah, and there was something I've read about or heard about, and it was something to ban the box where they couldn't actually take your record into consideration. Now, I understand if you're a bank robber, maybe you shouldn't get a job at a bank, but then again, maybe you've changed. Who's to make that call?
Maybe you know the bank better than anyone else.
Yeah, some people, I do feel like people do get, their application put at the bottom because they selected that they were answered yes or checked the box to being a convicted felon. But you know what? I have met some people in my journey already several times that have come out with a record that will be some of the hardest working people that is just looking for the opportunity to get hired. Now, on the flip side of the coin, if you get somebody out there that's fired up about doing right and they get turned down at McDonald's, that's definitely discouraging.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's what drives a lot of people, especially when you come out of prison and you have obligations to pay fines and child support and all this, and you can't get a job anywhere, but you got a plug where you can go get a pound of dope or whatever. That's, I think, what turns people back to what they know.
Mm-hmm.
Not saying it's right or wrong. I just, I do think that they should have a different screening process on how they hire people based off their records.
And we stick with what's comfortable a lot of times. And I know from my experience, after about maybe my first 3 months of being here, I had 2 jobs. And I lined up, I interviewed, they gave me the job, and then gave me the background check, and we're like, no.
Yeah. Well, that's what I love about being a peer, because it's my background, it's my lived experience, it's all my past that has become purpose now, and has made me extremely effective at what I do. There's a saying that what we know can't be taught or replicated or learned by reading a book. I mean, we have the lived experience, and I think experience is always going to outweigh knowledge.
No, I absolutely think so too. I wanted to ask. Jamie had a question up there. I think it had something to do with employers and clean time versus using occasionally. Do you have any certain thoughts on this, Paul? Being an employer yourself?
Well, in trying to work with employers and get them to hire addicts, there's a lot of different philosophies, a lot of different paths to recovery. There's no contesting that. But the clearer you think and the more sober you are, the more confident you're going to be. Because when you go for a job like you were talking about that you really want and get rejected, that hurts, man. It's a feeling of judgment. When you try to do something and you fail, it's a feeling of failure. And so being able to keep yourself mentally and emotionally in a good, healthy place as you're getting started, I think is critical.
Mm-hmm.
What that comes across to the employer as, hey, this dude wants to work. And so we have not a lot, but a group of employers that specifically hire our graduates on recommendation, because they come in and as Casey said, that they want it. They're hungry. Give me a chance. And so, we've got a group of guys now working in a company that once they were released, got out and got through the first 3 to 5 months, they got a job. They're making $20 an hour.
Making a good living.
And so, but what has to stand out is, I can do this. I want to do this. And if you give me a chance, I will do this.
That's right.
And so I would highly recommend abstinence. Your choice. But I think that's the choice of wisdom.
Mm-hmm. And I guess just as a follow-up, it might be minuscule, but so you deal with these people, integrating them into society. How, in my experience, because this affects me, do you recommend people be open about being in recovery?
Yes.
In their job interviews and everything? Okay.
Yeah, because it's like you've got a criminal record. Okay, yeah, you're correct. I do. I suffer from the disease of addiction. I abused drugs. I got in trouble behind that since then. I went through Exodus.Life. I've been working with a peer specialist since then. I've maintained recovery. I've got a sponsor. I'm working steps. I'm doing, if you got it, it's like for me, whenever I got out of prison, I was so ashamed for the fact that I went to prison. You know what I mean? And I held my head real low. And when I started to do something about it, it made it very easy to be transparent about it. Mm-hmm. Like it is right now. I have no problem talking about my past.
Well, and the thing is, if you are, you bury your heart in the truth about your life to somebody and they don't want to hire you, well, you don't want to work for them.
I was just thinking,
why would you want to work for them? I wouldn't want to work for them. I don't care what they were paying.
Yeah.
And so what you do is you drop the formality of the interview and go face to face, human to human, and say, yeah, I screwed up big time. And I can't tell you, as I said a while ago, I can't tell you how much I've learned. Mm-hmm. And if you're willing to hire me, then I'm going to take all that I've learned, and you're going to make money off of it.
Mm-hmm. I'll be glad you did. Be glad you
did. But you've got to have that mindset.
Because I think even like an employer would be able to recognize, oh, this guy has a better ability at human connection. And I think you're better at, selling and working for and doing all these things for an employer if you just understand emotional intelligence.
Yes.
On a level that other people can't.
Yeah, and statistically, he's not at any greater risk with a dude that walks in without a record than he is with you.
Mhm.
The chances are just as high that guy's an addict. They're just as high that he's going to be that statistically,
They just don't have the record attached to it.
They just don't have a record attached to it.
Mhm.
And so intelligent employers are going to go by their instincts in their interviews.
Mhm.
It's very difficult to interview for character. But if you bring character to the interview, then you got something to talk about.
Mhm.
Well, and
That's a good point.
talking about this, I was just thinking, even if you don't have a criminal record, I've never met anybody that was perfect to begin with. Everybody's got something in their past that they're probably not proud of, or, mistakes that they've made. Should you be condemned the rest of your life for?
Casey, I'm glad you said that, because it's something that I wanted to make a point about a while ago. I've been working with broken people for 35 years. Not all of them were poor, and not all of them were addicts.
That's right. Yeah.
And the reality is that the problems we face as human beings are the same. And again, hold your head up. That person over there may not have the problem that you have, but they certainly have a problem with being judgmental.
Oh yeah. I love talking about that, because everyone's judgmental, and it's something that we try to turn off as much as possible.
Well,
it's just human character.
That's right. And at the root, the problem of addiction is a problem of maturity, like we said. And so there's like an infinitesimal small difference between the guy that's closing down a bar every Friday night and sleeping around on his wife and yada yada and yada yada, and an addict over here.
Mhm.
They're human beings with flaws that are creating problems for themselves in their lives.
Yeah.
One of them is going to work every day and functioning. Maybe the other one isn't, but beyond that, there's not that much difference. So why should you hold your head up?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
No, absolutely. I think that's very valid stuff. So I wanted to switch it up a little bit. I'm pretty sure. Forgive me if this is a bit overly transparent, but you, Casey, I'm familiar that you were prescribed medication initially, and then that's how you kind of fell into addiction.
Yeah, well, I was the guy that grew up, and all my friends started kind of drinking, and I enjoyed being a designated driver and driving all their cars, and really was
nice guy.
Yeah, I was terrified of my mother at the time too. Still kind of am.
Still am.
So my brother, he kind of started early, and I kind of seen his mistakes, so I try not to make any of them. But then I started drinking and having a good time from that. Now I don't ever remember having to get up and drink a drink in the morning to keep going, but nevertheless, I was spending a lot of time drinking and hanging out. My dad died when I was 20. And I had never really dealt with it. I was just, trying to go on with life as long as I could. And then about 27, I just remember everything just becoming very difficult. Everything that it was second nature was all of a sudden it was extremely tough. And so I seen a psychologist, and about the second visit, he said, you got clinical depression. And so he referred me to this psychiatrist, and I went down there, and people have asked me if I went down there seeking drugs, and the answer is no.
Mm-hmm.
I wasn't far enough along to know how to do that yet. And after I talked to him, he basically said that I had lost my focus, and if he could get me back focused, he thinks I would be fine. So he prescribed me Adderall and Valium and eventually Xanax. And I don't know why those combinations of anything would apply to clinical depressions, but behind that, I started to take that. I was early on in addiction. How you tell yourself, well, this was prescribed by a doctor, so it must be okay.
So they're right.
So they're right. I mean, I went and seen a doctor. I was honest. He gave me this. So, and it wasn't long before that, you start missing visits, and then somebody in the street say, try this. It's the same thing. And you can get it 24 hours a day without a prescription, and it's off to the races. So, but yeah, to answer your question, a psychiatrist is what started.
So do we think that we're over prescribing? Do you think we're over diagnosing, or do you think that not we, but do you think we as a culture are over prescribing, over diagnosing, or just don't understand?
Well, I definitely think that, and I'm no doctor, nowhere near the brains to be a doctor, but I do think that you should be cautious sometimes. I'm not saying all doctors are bad, but there were the pain specialists out there that were getting people strung out. And in my mind, doctors aren't there to cure you. That they treat you, they have job security.
Mhm.
So, and I'm not saying that all doctors are bad. That's definitely not. I see doctors all the time that help me out, don't prescribe me narcotics. But, there are doctors that will over prescribe, and we see it in the media all the time.
Mm-hmm.
You hit a hot button for me, and I'm going to try not to get too fired up about it.
Get fired up.
Come on, Paul.
That's what we're here for, man.
Well, I think there's a bigger problem of acting like we have answers to questions that we don't have answers for. And so if you look at the treatment record nationally of most substance abuse treatment centers, the relapse rate for their people who complete their programs on a national level is like 78%. Hello. So three.
That's for clinical treatment centers.
And that's for those who finish the treatment. And the reality is 80% of people drop out before they finish. And so that 78% is of those who actually stayed for so the point is that we're still learning and we don't understand, but we act like we do.
Yeah.
And I think that's true across the board in the medical profession. And so just as I was saying a while ago about an addict has to move out of the fantasy world and the world of illusion that he was living in or she was living in and into the real world.
Mm-hmm.
I think our culture has the same problem. I think there are certain things that we've got to recognize. We don't know the answer to it. We don't know why children who are taken from their families at an early age sometimes suffer very severe emotional consequences. We don't know why addicts struggle the way they do. We know some things, but we don't know everything. And our tendency is to assume that the experts do know, to take their word for it, and then just assume whatever treatment they give us is the appropriate treatment. Mm-hmm. And the reality is, as I told my daughter yesterday, dear, I'm going to fire your psychiatrist. He works for me, and what he's doing. So my point is being willing to be assertive and take control of our own bodies, our own health, our own treatment, if nothing else, by asking questions and being skeptical, instead of assuming that the quote experts actually have it right. Mm-hmm. And probably they do. Maybe they do. Hopefully they do. But there's nothing wrong with asking and being assertive.
Yeah, I know, at least from my experience, I got in trouble when I was in college. I was in an intensive outpatient program, and they pretty much said that the genetic gene that is for addiction and alcoholism primarily for me. I later had some problems with cocaine. Is the exact same for ADD, attention deficit disorder. Uh-huh. So I took a survey. They said, you have ADD. I went to a doctor. They said, you have ADD, and gave me Vyvanse within like days. Yeah. Like literally within days. And this is now I'm like 19 years old. So it never really made sense to me. And I was like, okay, well, I guess I can try it out. Took it for maybe like a month. They upped it like every 2 weeks or something. And then after a while, after that month, I was like, I don't feel normal, because, Adderall and Vyvanse, that sort of stuff ramps other people up if you don't have ADD. And for me, it just made me feel sluggish. So I stopped taking it. If I'm being real honest, I just sold it to buddies. But I was at least fortunate enough to look in the mirror and be like, I don't like this, and stop. You know what I'm saying? Because that sort of stuff isn't my addictive bag. But as you were saying, I was fortunate enough to say this doesn't work for me, and be assertive in my own destiny. There are different parts in my life where I've been fortunate enough for that. But I think on the other end of the spectrum, something like that made you the man that you are today, Casey.
Definitely. People always say, I wouldn't go back and change everything or anything because, it's maybe the person I am today. It has definitely shaped me in a lot of ways, but there are some things, we all have regrets. I mean, I didn't want to put my mom through that stuff, and I didn't want to destroy my reputation, but I think that God had much bigger plans for me. And he's going to use all that to, help for me to carry out his purpose on this while I'm here on this world.
And spread the message.
Yeah. Somebody had responded something up there, and it actually was a peer from Exodus about the if you could scroll up just a little bit, that's a good answer. The Mache there, she's from Exodus. She's a female peer there, and she gave a really good answer about breaking the stigma. If you read it, it says, this is an educational conversation geared towards understanding the stigma can be broken when people are viewed as humans and not viewed as a drug.
Mhm.
I think that's a very good answer. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. I just wanted to acknowledge that.
That's one thing
You're
that
just-
I do.
You're trying to get kudos for when you get back.
Well, I taught her everything she knows already. So.
I wanted to balance my statement a little bit. I want it to be clear. I have great respect for the medical profession and for behavioral health. I'm not saying to discount things that they say or theories that are well researched. I'm just saying, don't turn your mind off.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Just think about what you're doing.
Think for yourself and find your
That's right.
program.
That's
'Cause
right.
that's actually what I wanted to get into was like, some organizations and states even as a whole are very either pro or anti medically assisted treatment and what exactly that means.
Yeah.
I've been in situations or spoken with people who are like, I'm 25 years clean. I smoke weed every day of my life, but I haven't shot dope in 25 years. So if that works for you, that works for you. That's not my story, and that's not my judgment to make. I was just kind of like wondering what your thoughts are when it comes to medically assisted treatment, I guess, on the other side of this conversation.
That's always a hairy conversation with me. This is my view on it. I believe that the goal should always be abstinence, and that's what works for me.
Mhm.
My job professionally is to meet people where they're at without judgment. If somebody comes in and they tell me that they're not slamming heroin, but they're smoking weed, and who am I to cast judgment on them if that's working for them?
Mhm.
Again, like I said, the goal should be, should always be to be abstinent. But
And I know some people who are like, you're not practicing an honest program. You're taking Suboxone. Like older heads are literally just like so dug in the trenches when it comes to this
Yeah,
sort of
well,
stuff.
with the opioid problem being as bad as it is, and as many people as we have buried this year, I wish that some of them could have possibly found a MAP program and they might still be here. Again, if you're slamming heroin out there and Suboxone helps you get off of that, I think more power to you. Do I think there should be a taper down? Yes, that's my opinion.
Mhm.
I'm not a doctor, but I definitely think that there are a lot of good purposes for MAT, and if that works for you, more power to you.
Mhm.
Yeah, and I agree with you. I think the rub comes when they're put on Suboxone and there's not real intervention into the issues that led to the addictive problem in the first place. And it's easy to write that off and say, well, no, he's got a gene that's got him all messed
Exactly.
up, and so we're just going to put him on Suboxone and a lot, in my view, probably continue to stunt his emotional and personal growth. And so, I'm probably a little more old school about the abstinence part, but much better to be on Suboxone and fighting that battle than to be dead.
Mhm.
And it won't be any comfort, as I say, we can put on your gravestone, he had a bad gene and then he died.
What did you say this morning? I think you said, he tried real hard.
He tried real hard.
tried
real hard.
He tried real hard, but then he died.
Yeah.
But because the reality is, you smoke dope, it may be laced with fentanyl.
Mhm.
You do meth, it may be laced with fentanyl.
Yes.
The reality is you're putting your life in danger, and that's not what your life is for.
Mhm.
It's to engage and bloom and blossom and grow.
Yeah, and contribute and
And
pay that forward.
Yes.
Absolutely.
I love Casey's story. The way he stayed sober in that first year and a half, when it's really hard, is he kept his mind on other people's problems instead of his own.
Really?
Yeah, he's
Sometimes
serving other people.
Yeah.
And I think that's what we're designed to be as humans. And I think the real solution to quote, a drug issue or addiction issue in America is everybody that's listened to this podcast and has gone through it, being willing to stand up and be proud and give back.
Mm-hmm.
Definitely.
And I that resonates with me. That's why I asked, really, is because I'll be going on a year in September 23rd, and that has helped me out. Was just staying busy and being in situations where I'm so busy helping other people out that the only opportunity, not opportunities, but the real time when I do work and get introspective is when I'm doing step work or something like that. So I'm not just like in this isolation bubble of the pit of despair when I'm about to go to sleep or whatever. Is just like, I'm so exhausted from helping other people out and have so much gratitude for paying it forward that I sleep like a baby every night now.
Yeah, definitely. I try to stay in these growth areas. They're very, very uncomfortable. So I try to stay uncomfortable because I definitely want to grow. Like they said, there's no growth in the comfort zone, and there's no comfort in the growth zone. So I've got a lot of growing I want to do, and I'm just going to keep pushing forward. At this point in my recovery, it's the drugs. I'm so past wanting to use drugs. Now I just want to be the best version of myself. And that's really for me when the work has started. Mm-hmm. First, it's identifying problems because, now that I've been in this business, it's amazing to me how long that someone can live with the problem. I mean, you can do it your whole life. I mean, I can do it my whole life. Mm-hmm. Now that I'm starting to see the problems, I was telling my wife the other day, I said, I'm pretty good at what I do, but I could be a lot better. And that's what I love about being a peer and working at Exodus with Paul and them, is just being able to not only help people, but learn how to be a better version of myself.
Mm-hmm. And what one of those ways that we do that, I know Jamie asked this question a while ago, and I kind of kept rolling with the conversation, but he asked about what the peer recovery specialist training process is like. If you could explain that.
Yeah. So in Arkansas, basically you have to have 2 years clean.
It's a year here in Virginia.
Okay. Yeah. It's 2 in Arkansas. So once you have 2 years clean, that qualifies you. Okay. From that point forward, you would need to sign up to take do the training through the Arkansas core model, which is 30 hours.
Okay.
After you complete the training and register as a PIT, then you would, if you can't get hired, you can actually volunteer to get your 500 hours of kind of on the job training.
Cool.
In addition to that,
what's PIT stand for?
Peer in training.
Peer in training. Mm-hmm. Okay. And
then after you got your 500 hours, you will have 25 direct supervision hours. Mm-hmm. So that would be if I was I'm a peer supervisor, Paul was and I was directly supervising him, I would do that for 25 hours, or we could do it as a group with other peers. So after you get your 500 and your 25, you've done the 30 hours of the core training, 2 years clean, then you qualify to take the test and get certified.
The state exam.
The state exam.
Yeah, that's almost identical here in Virginia. It's the 500 hours is the same, the 25 supervised. It is only 1 year clean, but it is a 72-hour class that you have to take instead. So that's kind of the trade-off. Yeah. And, I really recommend it. I'm currently working toward that. I just need the year clean at this point. And a lot of people have even said, oh, you could take the test and doing it right now. Who would know? Well, 1, I would know. Right. 2, I have a record that says I got a DUI on September 23rd. So if someone wants to look it up, they'd be like, no, you don't have your year clean, bro. Yeah. And so then, that would knock me down a peg a little bit. So just before we wrap up a little bit, we've still got 10, 15 minutes. I wanted to ask what sort of stuff you gentlemen have seen here at McShin that you might want to take back with you or that you could possibly implement, because I know we also have a jail program here that's somewhat similar. It sounds like I think we have the McShin Foundation program in Pamunkey, RSW, and Riverside, and it seems similar. I was wondering maybe some of the other stuff that you've seen, what your observations are in general.
Yeah, well, I've had a great time, and looking forward to even more information. I think for me, the most important insight is the possibility of being able to financially sustain a program without moving into the clinical elements and relying on third-party payers. Because the big problem with a nonprofit is you have to have money to run it. It takes money to hire people, it takes money to keep the building open.
And then it's not for profit.
Yeah,
So it's like you
so
don't
it's
make
kind of-
money
that's
off
right.
of it either.
And to work at the scope of the need requires a lot more money than I think I can raise from individual donors alone. And so we've been searching for additional ways to fund the operation. And it never occurred to me that people who had didn't have insurance, or people that had been through the rehab kind of merry-go-round 2 or 3 times might be willing to actually pay for services, and that we could go to a sliding scale, and that might be feasible. That's been very, very important.
The sliding scale versus like the sober living to the intensive.
Yeah,
of
well,
what you're paying for in services.
What you're paying for in services.
Yeah.
And so, it costs this X amount of dollars to provide the service. Maybe that person can't afford that. And so you meet them where they are.
Absolutely.
And get a scholarship.
Just as Casey was saying, you
Right.
try to meet people exactly where
That's
we're
right.
at.
And so to be able to do that at scale, I needed to see it to believe it. And now I've seen it, and now I believe it. And that's real exciting for us in terms of possibilities for future programming.
Wonderful.
Yeah,
Casey?
Everything that Paul said, he's the executive director, so I like listening to him and learning from what he says. But I love the housing that y'all have here. I think that if we could implement that into a similar system, we could be successful as you guys are. This is our first day, so we still got a lot of stuff that we're going to learn. But just seeing how successful y'all been in the jails, that's really impressive. I would like to try and maybe even go that direction one day and see if we couldn't possibly get the same kind of successful numbers out of Arkansas, because I do have a heart for people incarcerated.
Because that is one of the main things that we've tried to drive home, is the data-driven, evidence-based program. At the end of the day, being able to look and say, this is our recidivism rate versus this is what it was without the program. Do you guys currently have that sort of data? Because it sounded like it when you started talking about how many are incarcerated. I could hear the passion in that.
Yeah, well, there is. We since we started, it's only been a couple of years. We've been in full swing for 3 years, I guess, almost 4.
It's awesome.
We've had 600 graduates, and we have a 15% recidivism rate.
Wow.
The rate for the state of Arkansas is 56%.
Get out of here.
No kidding. We've saved them millions of dollars.
That's practically like a quarter reduction.
That's really on the low side of it too.
Yeah, and so now that's not just our academy, but it's wraparound services. It's you graduate from the academy, and then you connect with Casey, and so you got Casey around for as long as you're willing to have him around. So we're providing follow-up services. And
so on speed dial for like aftercare of not like aftercare treatment, but Casey, I'm struggling. Can I talk to you? Can you get me in this job interview?
It's totally
stuff like that.
It's totally voluntary. You know what I mean? If we said when you guys graduate, you have to come see us, we would be as successful. I don't think.
No, I don't think
that's
so.
That's part
either.
of what being a peer specialist is. It's a voluntary service for the peer to come see us. But when they decide they want to come see us, that's them buying in.
It's more advantageous to everyone if you're helping the people who want the most help too. Everyone
Absolutely.
wins more in that way.
That's right.
You come see me, and we set you some goals. I'm gonna walk right beside you, and we're gonna get to those goals. But I think it's the continuum of care that is crucial. You come into a program like Exodus, and you get education on stuff you probably never even thought about. You come out of there real fired up. When you cross that threshold coming out of being incarcerated, things change, and you got to figure out a way to keep that flame burning, keep it hot on them, and that's where we come in.
And having someone, even if it's just to process the rent, the budget, the fines, the driver's license, the outstanding warrants, the wife, the kids, the family. I mean, it just goes on and on and on. And if you're by yourself and you're alone, it's just, you feel like Wile E. Coyote. Well, your listeners may not remember Wile E. Coyote.
Yikes.
However, but there was always a big rock falling down and nowhere to run. And that's what it feels like when you first get out. If you got a guy like Casey say, been there, done that, it's a lot of hard work, we can do it, let's get started and start developing plans, then there's a lot more hope.
Yeah, instead of squandering in the problem, you look at someone like yourselves, gentlemen, and say, there's a way. So instead of bitching and moaning about it, let's start getting to work.
That's right. Nothing special about us.
The people that do put their best foot forward and go and take advantage of our services and stuff, I've seen a lot of them take off. I mean, like a rocket ship still going. It's people that get out. If they get out and they do this woe is me victim mentality and they sit around and isolate, they're just a matter of time before they're right back in the same situation.
Mm-hmm.
Jails, institutions, and death. That's the promise of drugs, and it's very, very accurate.
Yeah, or dead in the water, and what, like, an attitude of complacency and indifference. That's something I've started to struggle with. Is like actively being like, I gotta go to a meeting, or like I gotta call my sponsor, because at first it was like something I had to do. Now it's something that I have to want to do, or I won't do it.
That's a great way to put it. We had this female inmate graduated, got a job, did everything right, and about 9 or 10 months in, I went into the restaurant and she was my waitress, and she had on a T-shirt that said, "I don't want an adult today." and so I asked her how she was doing, and she said, "Well, I was doing great, but I'm almost a year into it, and this is not fun all the time."
It's not,
and it's not, and that's the point.
Mm-hmm.
We've got to be able to cope with that.
Yeah.
And but hey, I am older than I want to admit, and I thought I'd be grown up by now. I was wrong, and I get tired of adulting sometimes too.
Yeah.
No one wants to adult all the time.
The other thing that I wanted to add is, I think that what's important for me and being involved in this peer movement is let's just not hide from the fact that drugs are a problem. Addiction is a very deadly disease. There's a lot of people dying from it. Let's, use the peer services, use us, and let's try in return, besides keep people, lead them to recovery, get them to obtain their goals, get them to start dreaming, having dreams again, and want to be successful. And in return, let's reduce some recidivism and save the taxpayer some money. I mean, it's a win-win for everybody.
No, absolutely.
And I couldn't be more excited to be involved in it. That's for sure.
We're really happy to have you on, Paul. Any final thoughts?
Well, just again, if you're an addict, you've been incarcerated, you've had a tough life, and it's hard, but you may be more valuable right now to the people around you than you've ever been. And so don't be afraid to give back, to give cheap advice, to give encouragement, and to give hope. And you may be remarkably surprised by the impact that you can have in the world around you and how you feel about yourself because of it.
That's right. Share your story. And just like John says here, give them that hope shot.
Mm-hmm. Give them that hope shot and get in the herd. Right. I'm Alex. This has been an absolute delight. Casey and Paul, it's really, really great conversation. I'm happy to have you guys on. Todd, excellent work, my friend, as always. Y'all have a great rest of your day. Thank you.
Love you, Megan.
One thing we do here, we always educate our participants. I want you to leave here after your 30, 60, 90 days, or however long you stay and leave. I want you to be educated about the disease of addiction, about substance use disorders, what you need to do to personally recover. But I want you to know why we don't have the support we should have. I want you to know where all the funding goes, what the thinking is of our culture, why we're the way we are. And just for the record, everybody put it right in. I hereby deputize each and every one of you as an ambassador to be a face and voice of recovery from here on out. You've just been deputized. You just became ambassadors of a recovery movement, an authentic recovery movement. What authentic means is by people in recovery themselves. This is our call to action.